Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monsters Den. It's going to get nasty in here today because we're going to be talking about the video nasties. Some of you might be watching and saying, Pete, what the hell is the video nasties? Well, we're going to tell you. This is a pretty funny thing that happened for a while. Let me introduce the crew first. We got Craig Kaminsky in the house. Dan Brown is here. Chris Allo's here. Jamie Laszlo's here. And Davey Gallagher is here all the way from Scotland. We got the full crew tonight. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you?
How's
Amazing.
everybody
It's
doing?
been a hot minute since we were all on one,
It
isn't it?
has been, right? It has been. It's been a few episodes. So, yeah, so the video nasty. So this was kind of this craze that hit the world of horror a number of years ago, where, and David can tell the story a little better than me, where basically a whole bunch of films were picked as being way too nasty and not safe for public consumption. There's a lot more to it than that. It gets very, very involved. But then when you start to look at the list of films, you start to think, well, what's really wrong with that movie? It's just a fucking horror movie, right? But apparently not to some people, right? So Dave's going to go a little bit in depth here before we start talking about some films. There's kind of like three major categories. We've each picked one from each. We're going to briefly talk about each film and whether we think they're all really that nasty or did they just get a raw shaft here, right? So anyway, David, get us started here, and then we'll get into the films.
Sure. So essentially, the phenomenon starts with a group started by an infamous woman in the UK called Mary Whitehouse, who ran all sorts of campaigns against all sorts of television, film, music, public decency. An old busybody type woman, just a little old housewife who had decent intentions but got far too much power commensurate with her actual station. People started listening to her, and she was getting people hired and fired from major productions. She got Philip Hinchcliffe, the Doctor Who producer, fired, for example. So the BBC were listening to Mary Whitehouse. And then she went through this period of being kind of ignored. People kind of mocking her. Deep Purple wrote the song Mary Long that references her, and she was a figure of fun. And then things stopped being funny when pretty much her doppelganger, but looking a bit younger, Margaret Thatcher, got elected in 1979. We're not going to turn this into a polemic, but essentially the country starts to move into a much more conservative bent, and the media sees upon this to, it has to be said, the right-wing media sees upon this to start to conjure up hatred towards certain types of film, certain types of television as well, but for our purposes, film, that were, to our purposes, genre film, mostly horror film, but genre film certainly. And they weren't just said to be, oh, that's a bit out there or that's a bit much. Eventually, Acts of Parliament saw people go to jail and being prosecuted for distribution of what we're talking about today, the video nasties. So it starts out as raids by the police on little companies, tiny little companies, because it was the Wild West in the UK at the time when it comes to video distribution. The UK had more VHS recorders than anywhere else on earth per capita because we only had 3 channels. So there was a much bigger appetite for more content. There was no Channel 4 yet, which became the kind of edgy channel, who would show this kind of thing eventually. But Mary Whitehouse and her campaign kind of pushed that into the public consciousness. The public started to be whipped up by the media into this stuff's corrupting your kids. Not too dissimilar to the kind of thing that you'd see with Judas Priest and Ozzy Osbourne
I was
in
going to say
America.
the PMRC here with
Typical.
music in
Yeah.
this country.
Yeah, a couple years later.
But imagine if Judas Priest were found guilty and sent to jail. That's the kind of difference. Because people in this actually did go to prison. Not the big companies or anything, but video shop owners for the first couple of years a few of them went to prison. One of them for 18 months. So really big deal, considering his major crime was, I think that was the Evil Dead. Distributing the Evil Dead for a version that was a minute longer than the approved BBFC version. The British Board of Film Censors, now the British Board of Film Classification. So essentially, it's just the films that were caught up in the hysteria of this movement of these will corrupt your children, blamed absolutely everything to the society's ills on these movies. They'll corrupt your children. There's literally articles in the documentaries that accompany this phenomenon. Jamie's got a picture or two behind him. I put a picture of one of my box sets on Jamie's group earlier. There's literally articles written where animal behavior was being blamed on these films. Animals in the household that were attacking family members, perhaps, they were blamed on the films. Or they must have been watching some horror movie on
Just
TV.
think about how ridiculous that
Ridiculous. Yeah, total nonsense. And then when the Video Nasties movement ends, it really doesn't end until about 2000. And that's when a guy called James Furman leaves the BBFC, and a lot of things start to pass, and we start to get uncut versions of a lot of things. But to show how stupid the whole phenomenon was in the first place of censorship, the police were given this list ostensibly of video nasties, but they weren't told all of them at any one point. This list has been compiled in retrospect, but at the time it was left up to them. So the police were seizing the big red one, the Sam Fuller film, thinking it was a porno film. It's a World War II film with Mark Hamill. They were seizing Apocalypse Now because one of them remembered Cannibal Apocalypse. They were seizing the best, what's it called, the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas?
Yeah, with Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton, because it sounded like a porno. So it was the police themselves were just being let rampage around video shops, as ridiculous as that image is, and just deciding what and what wasn't decent for children, going by the covers, and in some cases like that, the title itself. And this phenomenon, as ridiculous as it all sounds, lasted for 7 years really, but kind of 20 years it took to really wash out the public consciousness. And in some cases, it never really has. Some films have just never ever been released because.
And think about what Davey just said, going by the covers. Now, if you're old enough, you remember the VHS days. You go into a VHS store. A lot of times, what they would do is they would market those covers, and that's what they would use to sell rentals. And it's how many times did you go and see a cover of a VHS tape and think, "Oh my God, look at how shocking that is." And then you go watch the movie, and you're like, what's on the cover was never depicted in the movie, or it definitely didn't parlay the content of the film based on the cover, right? So you have these policemen going around and just like scarfing up all these tapes when really the cover, it has nothing to do with the film itself. But that's the way.
And burning them crucially as well, which gives, of course, flashbacks of book burning, doesn't it? And they were burning them in incinerators. And this benefited large companies eventually, because who are the companies that are putting out these kind of films, these small films, these more extreme films? They're the small labels, Star Video and the like, Anna Video, who vanished because they couldn't afford to fight legal battles, or they couldn't afford to. Eventually, what they had to do was get their film certified, which cost £500 a go to get your film certified by the BBFC, and they couldn't compete with that. But the likes of Columbia, Paramount, they weren't making massively extreme films, so they didn't really need to worry. They had a few films each band. Friday the 13th, for example, was one of the nasties, but there was a Section 3 nasty. We'll go into the section. But essentially, it was a real tax on more extreme cinema. And it was all because of silly British legislation that classified video as publishing, because you're publishing the video, you're not broadcasting it, you're just making the video and then someone else is buying it. So it came up under the publishing wing of law rather than broadcasting, which is where cinema comes. So the two wings were separate. So for about 2 years, 3 years at the dawn of VHS, it was the Wild West. Anything and everything could come out on VHS. And then quite the opposite. From 20 years, some of the Eastern European Soviet countries were getting films that you couldn't get in the UK. The Exorcist, for example, wasn't released in the UK until the year 2000.
It's crazy when you think about it, right?
So we're going to have a look at three each of these films this evening. The three sections. Section one is films that were prosecuted for obscenity, which was the worst, where everybody involved, if you were found to have it, the retailer, the producer, the vendor themselves, they could all be prosecuted and sent to prison. The producers of the film, anybody and everybody, it never went to producer's level. That was their kind of caveat. They would just go for the small little video shop owner. Section 2 would be the lesser charge, where if you admitted to owning this material that you, and then you couldn't prove it to be obscene, it was still confiscated, but you just paid a fine. And then Section 3 is almost the most disturbing one of all, because you weren't breaking any laws having them, except for the ones the police just made up on the spot and then wrote down a bit of paper eventually. And then that was the law, because someone in dark rooms decided these films should be banned because we don't like them.
That film is nasty.
Yeah, just on the whims of people who hadn't seen horror films since maybe the 40s, maybe the 50s. Who would have thought Hammer was extreme? And all of a sudden they're watching Joe D'Amato films. Yeah, well, let's get into it, shall we?
All right, so we're going to start off with Section 3 and work our way to Section 1, which is supposedly some of the worst, right? So, Chris, your pick for Section 3, the video nasties.
Okay, Section 3 was a movie that I had never heard of before and never seen before, and it's from 1981, and it's called The Black Room. And it was really fucking weird. Of the three that I watched, I kind of enjoyed it because it was one of those movies where I'm like, I have no idea where the fuck this movie's going. It's like 75% erotic thriller and maybe 25% horror movie. And like real briefly, the storyline is so crazy. There's this guy, he's married to this hot blonde, but yet he cheats on her every chance he gets. And she gets off on hearing the stories that she thinks are made up stories of him fucking people in this black room that he says he rents. But he really is renting a room that's all black, and he really does fuck broads in this room. And the whole time I'm watching, like the beginning, I'm like, all right, this whole thing's kind of ridiculous because your wife is hot, and she's saying stuff like, "Oh, treat me like a whore." But then it took a really interesting twist because then she plays the detective part and goes to the black room and she starts fucking people in the black room. So it's really weird. That takes some crazy twists. I liked it, but it's in the realm of nastiness. This movie's not fucking nasty at all. Like, yeah, there's some nudity and there's a little bit of blood, but there could have been a lot more nudity and a lot more blood. So yeah, this is one of those ones where the classification of video nasty, I'm like, holy shit, this movie has nothing on, Cannibal Holocaust. So, I enjoyed it. I watched it streaming. I might actually buy the disc because I liked it enough to, I really want to watch the extras and shit because it's such a weird fucking movie. But yeah, I didn't think it was nasty at all. This was really, really tame.
And that was no black candles, correct?
No.
That was available in the U.S. It never was banned. It was in the U.S. on Vestron Video.
I believe so, Dan, and it just was recently re-released on Vinegar Syndrome. They did a Blu-ray of it. But yeah, I don't think it was ever banned or had any issues in America. And again, other than some tits and a little bit of fake blood, it's fairly tame.
And one of Linnea Quigley's first roles.
Yeah, I mean, the only recognizable faces, Linnea Quigley is in it for like 5 minutes, and the hot witch lady from Conan the Barbarian is in it for quite a bit. and she's just as fucking hot. I mean, the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, this lady's gorgeous. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the Black Room.
All right. Dan, how about your pick from section
Number
3?
3 is a film that I kind of heard about it. I bought it. I was interested. And of course, by the time the show comes, I can't find the copy I bought. So I end up having to watch it on some nefarious streaming channel to watch it. But it's called Werewolf Woman from 1976. It's like an Italian Spanish
As
production.
if Pete's not going to have a werewolf film. Come on.
I had one. I wish I could bring it and show it. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll tell you once again with this one, I believe this film that was on section 3, as you said. Yes, there's plenty of nudity, plenty of frontal nudity. And as a matter of fact, you can tell the frontal nudity is definitely pre-Brazilian waxing era because
I'll say
there's obviously a werewolf growing between her legs. But nonetheless, there's a lot of nudity and there's violence. It's basically the story is about a woman who, I guess the best way is she has flashbacks or dreams in which she is a werewolf, and she's very hot looking in these sequences. I think it reminds me there was a film at one point, I can't remember what the film about werewolves. They start having sex in the woods and they turn into werewolves.
The Howling.
The Howling, right. So there's something odd about, some furry woman, whatever it is. And she's murdering, and then you find out, is she really a werewolf or is it just basically a giallo film? Because it's kind of a mystery. You know who the killer is. And that's when I saw this thing, I sat there and said, there's certainly enough violence and breasts to keep both Chris and Craig extremely happy with the film. And there's enough mystery for like a giallo sort of sense to for Peter to say like, well, it's okay, but there's hairy women. But anyhow, I think it was with the section 3, it never really was banned. And the funny thing I heard about that we're talking about this witch hunt over there is I started researching into this film, and I found out that a lot of these lists were compiled. We said section 3. It was like if somebody had one complaint or somebody felt something wrong, they put it on the list.
One person, just one cop, one person in the department. That was it.
One known written complaint about this film, and that's all it was. So it became like a witch hunt. It became like the Red Scare era. It was just kind of weird, but I can understand where they come. But all these films, I mean, that didn't show up in the U.S. for a while. I never saw it. I never really paid attention to it. I don't think it was on video in the early days in VHS stores here in the U.S., but it certainly would have been banned. It was far worse.
Until Chris turned me on, so I never even heard of it.
Yeah, we ran a 35 millimeter print of that at Hudson Horror. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I didn't, but it's a good film, and
it's actually fun. Yeah.
What I was going to show, it is out. It's available. It's available on public domain titles in places. But if you could find one that's under RARO video,
yeah, that's what Pete had.
Raro Great.
With it and so forth. So, but it is still hard to find, even though it's not been banned in the U.S. Right.
Good one. Good pick, Craig.
Okay, all 3 of the movies that I chose were ones that I had never watched before, but I had heard of them. So my number 3 pick was the last horror film, also known as Fanatic, starring Joe Spinell and Carolyn Monroe, and easily. Easily of the 3, this was the most enjoyable, and I genuinely really enjoyed this movie. The plot is that Joe Spinell plays a cab driver who is obsessed with his favorite horror actress, played by Carolyn Monroe, and he has the wonderful idea to try to pitch to her a movie that he is going to write and direct, and she is going to be the vehicle for his movie. And he goes to the lengths of going all the way across the sea to the Cannes Film Festival to pitch the idea to her. Only he's not a director or a writer or anything. He's really just quite delusional. And Joe Spinell is at his sweaty best in this, just as a delusional, crazy guy. He really comes off well. Carolyn Monroe looks great in it, although I don't like her hairdo in it. She had a different hair color on the sides, but she looks great. There's some gratuitous nudity in some parts on the beaches, and some women who are trying to tempt Joe Spinell.
There she is.
And
Beautiful.
one of the really cool part, at least that I thought, was this was, to my understanding, done sort of total guerrilla style, no permits or anything, at the actual 1981 Cannes Film Festival. So there are movie premieres and such going on where they show posters and marquees of movies from 1981, like For Your Eyes Only or The Soldier or Possession, and there's some other ones. There's some humor in it, and of course some violence and a genuine mystery too. Once he's overseas, some people start disappearing, including Carolyn Monroe's ex-boyfriend, who was also her producer, and other people just start mysteriously disappearing. In my opinion, there was really nothing, even for 1982 standards. There were literally two scenes of some gore. One involving a murder scene where a person's head like falls off, and another scene, the same person gets his head cut off with a sword, I believe, or a blade of some, I forget, at the end. But honestly, for 1982, it's really not much different from what you saw in Friday the 13th from 1980 or The Prowler from 1981. I don't think it was anything really super gory, and the nudity that's shown is really just topless scenes, and they weren't sex scenes or anything like that. So I don't know why this would make a list. Maybe someone was offended, I guess, by the beheading or the head falling off, or maybe just some of the nudity. But all in all, it's a really fun picture, and I recommend anyone to check this out. I watched this streaming on Tubi. It was listed as Fanatic, but it was a lot of fun and a good movie to check out. So yeah, the last horror film.
Cool. Jamie.
Did you say Jamie or Davey?
Jamie.
Jamie?
Jamie.
Stop saying it so fast.
Davey?
Jamie and Davey sound very
Laszlo. Let's say last names from now on. Laszlo, you're up.
Laszlo. So yeah, when you really look at this list, you're like, that's on there? That movie's on there? What the hell? So when I saw The Evil on there, I'm like, I like that movie. I like haunted house movies. What's a haunted house movie doing on this list? And I watched it not too long ago, and I even got the Blu-ray. Watched it not too long ago, and I'm sitting there going, I don't remember anything over the top in that movie. And you know why? Because there isn't anything over the top in this fucking movie.
Other than Victor Buono, right? That's the one with Victor Buono at the end?
Oh, yes. As the devil?
Yeah. That's the only thing over the top.
It's, right, but it's not like gross or anything.
King Tut? King Tut's the devil?
King Tut.
King
He's
Tut,
the devil.
yes.
Literally, he's the devil.
But so I watched these movies, and I would, anytime something somewhat gross happened, I'd make a note and, kind of say, is this over the top enough that someone ban it? This one was tough because, I mean, in the beginning, a guy gets set on fire. He's clearly in a fire suit. It's clearly a different actor than the actor who caught on fire. He's bigger and he's in a fire suit. So it's hard to say that's graphic. A guy gets electrocuted, not graphic at all. A girl gets thrown around a room by spirits in her underwear. There's no nudity in this movie. There's a lot of headlights. There's a lot of camel toe, but there's no actual nudity. A guy uses an electric saw on his own hand. That's about the most graphic thing. And it's up against a door, and he goes, zzz. That's it. And it'll last a second. A dog kills a girl, but it's like something you'd see in a Rockford Files episode. A guy bursts into flame as he falls from a rope. Definite PG-13 shit. That would be PG-13 a day. There is a weird scene where everyone's possessed for a minute and they're gathered around this corpse. And if you blink, you miss it. But someone is like kissing the corpse. And I'm wondering if that did it. Like some kind of, like one of the six people's kissing a corpse, kind of kissing it. It's not like up close or anything. And you're actually asking yourself, is he kissing that corpse? So it's not even graphic. There's a girl that gets electrocuted, and the bolts of electricity around her literally looks like animation from a Disney movie, like animation over real life, like a Mary Poppins fucking bullshit. So yeah, I think if this movie got played like on FX or TNT, I don't think they have to edit out anything in this movie. There's not even an F-bomb in this movie. So just makes you scratch your head. But I did want to give a 1 to 10 rating on the bullshit meter on these. Now 1 is bad. You don't even want to be 1, okay? 10 is extremely bad. It's like hits of heroin. You don't want to even say I only did 1. 1 is bad. 10 is going to be awful. That's a fucking 10 on the bullshit meter. You got Miss Mary Whitehouse. She knows it's a fucking 10. Pointing at the 10. So that is a big time 10. Bullshit.
All right. As I think most of these will be, right? So
That's actually quite.
Well, they could all be 10s. But...
picture for Mary. That's quite a provocative picture for her. She's normally a lot more frumpy. Thatcher haircut and things.
Davey, how about your pick?
So one of the reasons that I kind of really fought for doing the sections was to kind of prove this point that we've already picked up on, that what the fuck are some of these films doing there? Why is Phantasm on the list? What the hell is there in Phantasm that's that extreme? There's so many in Section 3 where it is purely someone who just has a dislike for it. And in a lot of cases, they've just gone by the title. I think The Evil is probably one of those ones. It was a phenomenon that went by titles and went by covers quite a lot. So they would talk about the Driller Killer all the time because that title sounds really extreme. So parents would hear it and it would stick with them rather than something weird like Nightmares in the Brain or whatever. But the one that I thought really sums up, come on, how the fuck can this be banned, is from Section 3, the classic, the wonderful, by the legendary Duke Mitchell, Massacre Mafia Style. Now, I love this film. I've loved this film since the first time I saw it. But who's seen Massacre Mafia Style? Chris, you've definitely seen it.
I ran a 35 millimeter film print of it way before it was on home DVD or Blu-ray.
Grindhouse put this out in the box set with Gone with the Pope, Duke's assembled film. This is essentially just if Rudy Ray Moore and Ed Wood wanted to do a Godfather ripoff, they would come up with this. I mean, that's all it is. It's just a big love letter to The Godfather by Duke Mitchell, the B-movie actor, crooner, Las Vegas personality, decided he wanted to make a film, financed it himself. And it is just The Godfather. So The Godfather has the character, of course, of Vito Corleone, the Godfather. And he's the Godfather. So what does this film have? A Marlon Brando lookalike called the Padrone. So we've got a rip-off of him. And who's the I can't remember the actor's name, but the one who wants to push drugs into the Corleone Empire. Remember him? He's the Turk. Well, this film's got the Greek. Right. So everything along the way is just Godfather, Godfather, Godfather. Wedding with the all the music stuff, everything that you could possibly rip off, with a little bit more exploitation thrown in the top. But essentially, it is nothing but Godfather knockoff. Quite inept, really funny in a lot of places because, my God, he could not write a screenplay, Duke Mitchell, but nobody could tell him that because he was paying for the film. And he writes these long soliloquies about the life of an Italian American and how it's the most powerful thing on earth, and literally compares it to the power of the atomic bomb. And he loves his own dialogue, and it's wonderful. It's a real fun film. It is not in the most slightly embryonic part horrific. There's people getting shot in places, but it's a mafia film. This is not an extreme film remotely. The Godfather is 10 times more graphic, 10 times more mature, but this is an example of the film being banned because of the name. Massacre Mafia style, or The Executioner was the other name for it. So they were just banning films because it sounded horrific. But if they took the time to watch it, they would go, the real reason to ban something like this is because it's crap. It's total crap. But instead of just saying that and saying, well, that's not a reason to ban anything, we'll just let public consciousness and taste decide that. They want you not to be able to see it. So you can't see it because they think it's bad for you. The overlords. So they can watch them and it won't corrupt them. But if you watch them, it will corrupt you and your children. The hypocrisy of all sorts of censorship. Yeah, total bullshit that this was even considered for it. Never mind actually on the list. This is by far the most bizarre example of a video nasty I could possibly think of. Massacre Mafia style. A hoot, to quote Chris Allowell. A hoot.
It is.
It's
I
a
like
hoot.
it too.
Was that the
100%.
film that wasn't finished till like 30 years later? Or was that
No,
that's Gone with the
that's
Pope,
Gone
which
with the Pope, which
which
we
is
also
also a
ran.
hoot.
Yeah.
Which is also a hoot. Very briefly, the plot of that: Duke Mitchell kidnaps the Pope and decides to blackmail every Catholic in the world for $1 to raise $1 billion to get the Pope back. That's the premise for a movie.
It's-
Chris, you've seen that, but you've never seen The Godfather.
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, I've seen The Godfather.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought maybe.
I mean, there's plenty other like mainstream shit that I haven't seen. Like, I never saw a Titanic or Jerry Maguire, but I'm Italian, so I had to watch The
You have
Godfather.
to watch that right now.
And Duke Mitchell is also known for being in Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla.
Yeah.
Gorilla, yeah.
Which is on, if I'm not mistaken, Davey. I can't remember if it's Massacre Mafia style or Gone with the Pope, but it's an Easter egg on
It's
one of the
in
Blu-rays.
The Duke Mitchell collection. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
He looks like Peter Criss in that picture, just with a different hairdo. And that just looks
This film is
Little bit.
honestly, both of these films are just full of the most genetically Italian-looking people. He must have just been hoovering people off the street. You look Italian. Half
Yeah,
of the
I'm
cast
making
just
a
don't
movie.
look. Everybody looks like Macho Man Randy Savage. It's really
I'm
funny.
making an offer you can't refuse. I got $2 for you. Come on. It's like, and I buy a bowl
Yeah.
of pasta.
Oh, and
Give
he
you-
does the
I'll give you a
soundtrack as well.
meatball.
He sings the soundtrack as well. So writes it, produces it, directs it, stars in it, does the soundtrack. Master of all the trades.
There you go.
Yeah, we got those prints when I ran them right from Grindhouse, and they went over, particularly the first one went over really well. I don't know if you were there, Dan, for those shows.
No, I
but-
didn't see that. I didn't see those shows.
So Pete, what was your number 3? Your cat
All right,
3?
so my number 3, I'll go quick because I know we got a lot to cover here. So this is from 1983. Yeah, this film is a hoot. I can see why maybe some people might have picked on this a little bit. It's called Mausoleum, and it stars Marjo Gortner, right, which is kind of somewhat of a big name at the time, and Bobby Breezy, who, basically this is a story of a woman who gets taken over by a demon, right? And the demon's been kind of perpetrating this family for a while. And the whole movie goes about her going back and forth being the demon, and she's naked in most of the movie. She's having sex and killing people throughout the movie. There's some really, really good practical special effects in this film. So it's fairly gory. I think because it's fairly gory and it's got lots of nudity, that's probably why this film was picked. But again, like we've said, there's way worse films that are more extreme than this. And I remember specifically back in the day, seeing this poster, and this was on the VHS tape as well. This creature, it has nothing to do with the film.
Yeah.
In fact, the inside cover that they include here with the Blu-ray, that's actually more like what she looks like, the kind of the demon creature that she turns into. I don't know what the hell this thing is here, but this film is a lot of fun, and it's a total 80s film. And this is like a
They
perfect.
probably made that poster with what's his name's City of the Living Dead.
Yeah, Gates of Hell.
Yeah,
It looks just
they're
like
very
it,
Hell.
sculpt
To
shape.
play
Yeah.
off of that audience.
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, because this had the big VHS box, and you saw this in the video store, and you're like, oh, I got to get that. And then you're looking for this creature throughout the whole movie, and you're like, ah, it's not there. But you're pleasantly surprised because, like I said, there's a lot going on in this. It's pretty well done. I mean, you can tell it's on a budget, but John Carl Buchler, who worked on Reanimator and Troll, does the special effects in this. Really good. But I mean, she's great in the film, and she's just maniacal and just deadly, and she's totally hot as well too. Marjoe Gortner's, plays a typical Marjoe Gortner role.
I was just say he's Marjoe Gortner.
He's the same in every movie he's ever in.
Marjoe Gortner, yeah.
But that was the kind of the
Not
big
a
name that
child
they pulled in
evangelist,
for
he's an
this.
actor.
Even though by '83, is he really all that big a name anymore? Yeah, not really. Not really.
He's never that big, isn't he?
He was a child evangelist.
Yes.
He became famous
Yeah.
as a child.
Well, Dan, it's funny because I never knew that. Like, I just grew up watching him on Fantasy Island and Food of the Gods and all these crappy movies. And then it wasn't until like 10 years ago I saw that trailer and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's where this guy came from?
That was a film that came out in the early 70s. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
But
yeah.
just to sum up, then everyone we've mentioned so far in round one for category 3, these films would all have been confiscated, rounded up, and put in an incinerator, and you would be on a list to make sure that you didn't. You'd be monitored to make sure that everything you sold from then on was Bambi, was Educating Rita, was Terms of Endearment, that kind of stuff.
Well, that's why all these films ended up in the kids section in the United States.
So none of these would have seen you in jail, but everything we're about to talk about, you could potentially have done jail time just for letting someone rent a copy of it.
And in some instances, maybe not necessarily all these that we're talking about, some of these films were also cut for any theatrical showing, and then years later you would have to get like a Blu-ray or DVD edition to see the uncut version. And then when you see what was actually cut out, you're like, really? What's the big deal about that, right? So yeah. All right, Chris, back to you for section 2.
Okay, section 2.
Non-prosecuted.
Yeah, this is a movie that I'm definitely familiar with. I own a couple previous times. I have the Blu-ray, and I sat and watched it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I kind of forgot about a couple of the nasty scenes, and this is Slave of the Cannibal God from Sergio Martino, who did a ton of great Giallo films. Stars Ursula Andress and Stacy Keach and Claudio Casanelli. Of course, this was around the time that Claudio Casanelli starred in a bunch of Sergio Martino films, including one of my favorites, Island of the Fishmen. This is also known as Mountain of the Cannibal God and Prisoner of the Cannibal God. There we go. But I got to be honest, this most recent rewatch, I was fucking bored. It's 100 minutes. It's way too fucking long. You think you're getting a cannibal movie, and it's really like a jungle adventure movie until like the last 15 minutes. That's where all the action is. You finally see some fucking cannibals in the last couple minutes. There's a couple really cute naked like Indian girls early on. Ursula Andress, who I don't know how old she was when she made this movie, but she gets fully naked, shows beaver and everything. But the nasty parts are at the end where, okay, there is the group of cannibals. I guess it's really 4. They eviscerate a guy. They pull all his parts out. So that was kind of nasty. Then there's a shot, which I could be mistaken, but I always thought this shot was lifted from the Umberto Lenzi film Eaten Alive, where it's a bunch of cannibals and they grab like eels from this pool and they would like bite the end of the tail off the eel and literally skin the eel alive. It was gross. But I think that is from Eaten Alive, if I'm not mistaken. Put it in the comments. That part's gross. Yeah, the animal cruelty stuff, never good. But then the other 2 parts in here that are quite nasty. There's a pretty native girl, and she's lying on a very uncomfortable rock and graphically masturbates. And I mean, finger in orifice, something right out of a porno movie. This would not get passed as an R rate in anything. And I was like, wow, that's pretty wild. I know I have previous discs of this that's not in that. And then the other part, which had me laughing, there's another cannibal guy. He is butt naked, although you don't see much, but it's implied. And there's this giant, like 200-pound pig, and he's completely naked, and it appears that he's fucking the pig. There's not a close enough shot to see penetration, thankfully, but of course, implied bestiality is never good. So, okay, so this, I guess, is somewhat nasty between the eel eating and the masturbation and the pig fucking. So that's it's still not. Listen, it's still not a good movie. I'm still not in love with this movie. So, but that's Slave of the Cannibal God.
After all that, you still, after making bacon, you still don't recommend
Craig,
it.
it's 100 minutes. It takes like 85 minutes to get to that. I'm like, oh my God.
On the back of it, rather wonderfully, it says mastication, masturbation, bestiality, castration.
There you go.
There you go. Yes.
Name of a song, isn't it? I don't know.
It's like a jingle.
And then
That's right. I did. I forgot about the
shameless-
castration. Yeah, that's right.
The shameless Blu-ray of it is uncut, and it includes
That's streaming on
board
Tubi
game.
as the mountain of
so
the
you
Cannibal
can
God.
play a little board game. They literally give you
Wow,
snakes and
that's
ladders.
cool. Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have that in this. Where did I get this from?
It's like,
I mean, so this is them ripping the piss out of the video nasties, really shameless. They're saying, look, we're going to give you, what do you call it in America? Chutes and ladders, but it's snakes and ladders over here. So we're going to give you snakes and ladders to make fun of something that 20 years earlier was considered the most depraved.
Oh, this version's from Code Red,
yeah.
which I think's out of business now.
And then I love that they give you a sticker of Ursula Andress there, and if you lift up the sticker,
That's awesome. Davy's version definitely has mine beat on the packaging.
yeah, it's titty sticker and board game. What more can you ask?
That's
You
true.
got everything right there, right?
See, that's the version I should have bought.
It's a nice entertainment.
Bring boutique back to boutique labels.
There you go. There you go. All right, Dan, over to you.
All right, my category 2 film is actually a mainstream American film that came out in theaters. It wasn't like something that found its bow on home video, and that is, you can see it, Dead and
Buried. Yep.
We've talked about this in another show before. To be honest with you, I see nothing offensive in this film whatsoever, other than watching Jack Albertson stitch himself up in his stomach, or just the fact that James Farentino, I get it, that may be a reason to really ban it in England. But the last part is Lisa Blount, who was in An Officer and a Gentleman and so forth. And she actually takes her top off in the beginning, and I can see maybe cutting that out. But there's a little bit of over violence. I mean, it's like an H.P. Lovecraft story, if anybody's familiar with it. It's about zombies in a small town that are brought back to life, or vampire zombie mythos. And I didn't find anything offensive whatsoever. So I'm not going to go into it because I think we've discussed it in the past. And since it was in America, it's something that's been on the video shelves since VHS. So it's never been off the air, and it's always been on cable, and especially playing in some member of the Lisa Blount club somewhere in Akron, Iowa.
She looks great in
But
that.
that being said, yes, she was Dead and Buried, and fun film. But that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I enjoy that. Yeah, there's nothing offensive about that whatsoever. I know some people find that a little slow. Like Chris, you're not a big fan of that film, right?
I'm not. I've gone back and forth with it. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But what I don't understand is, and I don't want to make this episode too long, but I don't understand. Spoiler alert: we are going to kill people, and then do this work to bring them back as zombies. But all they do is still work in their same shitty, fucking menial jobs anyway. So we kill the guy at the gas station, but he's still working at the gas station. Let's kill the guy at the fucking bakery. But okay, now he's dead and he's a zombie, but he's still working at the bakery.
And then the new people they want to turn into zombies too, and like they can't work in the bakery because the owner's not dead.
He's never going to die. I just always wonder, what's the fucking point?
I just watched Dead and Buried myself this past weekend because you guys had mentioned it a few times, and I was saying the same thing. I was like, wait a second, the photographer is killed so that he could work at the gas station. And I was like, wait, I was like, I don't. So you and I even texted Chris. I said, are they trying to repopulate the town? I said, I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
But
Premise
once
is stupid, but everything else is so great about it that
Yeah, and it's
I mean, it's got a creepy vibe for sure,
And-
but
and the
I
poster-
just,
Robert
And the star of the
Englund
show is
did
Jack
great.
Albertson's glasses, man. Holy
Yeah.
cow. That's awesome.
It
Yeah,
comes
those-
off like a Stephen King
Yeah,
novel.
as if Grandpa Joe would be in a fucking.
And it's a great one-sheet poster for it.
Depraved
That was
Yes.
a great marketing poster when it came out.
Yes, for sure.
but I just always wonder that, like, you know, I don't know.
And
Just-
Dale Arden from Flash Gordon's in it. So
Yes,
And written-
pretty
written
nice
by,
look ladies.
Written by Dan O'Bannon.
yeah.
All right, Craig.
My movie from list 2 was one that I really was looking forward to watching, never having seen it before, and I was really disappointed. And that was Visiting Hours from 1982, starring Oscar winner Lee Grant, William Shatner, and Michael Ironside. I was really hoping that this would be just a fun slasher type movie, especially after seeing the premise that Lee Grant plays a feminist reporter who is attacked by Michael Ironside, and then subsequently, when she's in the hospital with her recovery, she is attacked once more again. I just wish if this one was it felt too long. I kept looking at my phone to see how long this was going, and as far as this being on any sort of nasty list, now I watched this on YouTube, and I don't think it was edited, but there was really not much that was objectionable in it, really much at all. There's some blood and some stabbings, but nothing that's people getting their heads cut off or anything like that. There's some attacking women and stalking and such, but I couldn't really find much offensive at all in this. I wish William Shatner was in it more, especially since 1982 was a banner year for him. I mean, he did Visiting Hours, Wrath of Khan, and Airplane 2. And in this one, he just didn't seem to have much to do. Lee Grant is a total Hormel canned ham in this movie, just overacting and going, I mean, like, that was just kind of goofy. But one fun thing that I did see, the nurse in this, who is more of a character than some of the other people, she's played by an actress named Linda Pearl. And when I was watching it, it's like, wow, she looks kind of familiar. If anyone watches the Office, the American version, she was Pam's mother, who Michael Scott ends up dating for a handful of episodes. So many years later, of course. But in this, she's probably in her late 20s or so. But yeah, just a disappointing kind of movie. And Michael Ironside, he's so charismatic, and with his voice, and especially after coming off of Scanners, he was seemingly miscast as someone who doesn't have enough to do in this and doesn't speak enough, and just to come across more as menacing. He could have had a total no-name play the same character. So yeah, really kind of disappointing, and just not a lot of I didn't see anything really wrong with this, especially even for the time period for 1982. So yeah, Visiting Hours, I don't see why it's on this list at all.
No, yeah, that was released in the US on CBS Video in the big square boxes in the video stores right out the gate. Yeah, it's kind of pedestrian too. It's nothing.
All right, Jamie, your pick from number 2. Where's it going to fall on your bullshit meter?
1976. We're gonna do a movie that we've all seen, and probably most of the people watching have seen. Eaten Alive.
Oh yeah.
Deathtrap Horror Hotel as well. Yeah, it's a redneck and his pet crocodile, and he has a hotel and he feeds people to the crocodile, blah blah blah. So watching it, trying to watch it through these people's eyes back then, what they may see wrong with it. I mean, okay, it's a horror movie. A chick in the beginning, she gets a metal rake taken to her. You see a lot of blood, but you don't see the rake actually make contact with her. There's a crazy dad who gets stabbed towards the beginning as well. You see the hole in his gut. It's a big time close up. I mean, you know, it's totally fake. These people realize these movies were fake, right? A little girl watches her mom get beat up, and then she gets chased by the psycho redneck with a scythe. There was a scythe thing from Children of the Corn. Scythe. Is it tasteful? No. Is it intense? Yeah, but I mean, it's not going to turn anyone into a child killer. I swear to God. What else? Oh, the worst thing in this movie. The worst thing is the dog and right when the dog shows up, you know, oh fuck. And the dog gets eaten by the alligator or crocodile. But here's the thing. When people get dragged away by this crocodile, the mouth doesn't even move. It's just it's totally 100% fake, for crying out loud. It looks like it's made out of wood. You know?
And that crocodile is always in that same spot, like right.
I mean, listen, to me, I love this movie. The whole movie looks fake. I don't think I've ever seen another motion picture that is so obviously the entire movie shot on a soundstage.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just so, but it adds to the charm.
Right, but it doesn't pull you in to make you feel like, oh my God, this is really happening. This is real. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Completely different from
that way. This, you kind of just roll with it.
Yeah.
So I think, Jamie, I think that's why. I think that's why this is on the list.
Because of the connection?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of the poster children for this whole thing. Even though it wasn't a video nasty, that's kind of the dichotomy of it. But they hated Tobe Hooper. And almost all his things.
Yeah, he was blacklisted right away.
So there were certain filmmakers, Joe D'Amato and him, Dario Argento's got loads in Section 3. Anything they did, Fulci, anything they did pretty much got put on the list.
Yeah, the dog scene bothers me, but they didn't really kill the dog. I draw the line when they do real animal cruelty in these movies, and that's where I'm like, no, that should be illegal. Now, should they ban what do you call it, Cannibal Holocaust because of that scene? Not now. No, it's grandfathered in. Just nobody do that anymore. I will never watch that movie because of the turtle scene. I've never seen the turtle scene. I don't want to see the fucking turtle scene.
I bought that, watched it, and sold that shit like the next day.
Yeah, no, I don't need to see that. Even if it was 40 years ago, and that turtle might still be alive, though. They live a long time.
Yeah, they live for hundreds of years. Yeah.
So that fucking turtle might still be alive. I'm gonna give it. Me and Mary's gonna give it a 7. Still bullshit. It's still 100% bullshit. It's just a 7, not a total 10.
You mentioned, Jamie, did these people think that the stuff was real? In the documentary that comes with Volume 1 on your main pitch, the MP, the actual politician responsible for getting this passed into law, is a guy called Graham Bright. He's dead now, thank goodness. But he genuinely believed that at least the top ones, the Section 1 ones, that a good number of them were snuff films and did depict actual death.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw the Cannibal Holocaust people had to show up in court to prove they were still alive.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is, I mean, for goodness sake, I mean, just look at the blood, look at the guts. I mean, if those people, you can produce a doctor to say, come on, these are clearly just animal guts. This isn't real blood, you can tell, nonsense. But an MP got that passed, and it was signed off by the bloody Queen as law to say that these were probably snuff movies and therefore obscene.
Crazy.
Even when the Apocalypse Now, they kill an actual water buffalo.
Yeah.
They cut his head off. That's not CGI. So,
to this day, Never Say Never Again is cut in this country because of the horse fall, where the horse goes over the cliff.
Oh, that was real?
That was real. Yeah.
Oh.
Apparently the horse was okay, but they couldn't prove it, so it still had to get cut.
Crazy. All right, Davey, your choice from Section 2.
So Section 2, I wanted to go for 3 very different things to prove 3 very different points. So Section 3 was the one where I thought in no way, shape, or form should this have been banned. There's nothing in it offensive at all. Section 2, I wanted to pick something that has got loads of things that could get you theoretically on this kind of list, but it's an artistic achievement, and that is Zalewski's Possession from 1981. And this film is just a masterpiece. This shouldn't be on this kind of list. This should be on, as it was, the kind of lists to win the Palme d'Or, to do well at the Cannes Film Festival. In a just world, this is the kind of film that would win Oscars, because the performance here of Isabelle Adjani is one of the most brave and bold performances that any actress has ever given in cinema. It's a stunning achievement from her. It's a wonderful performance from Sam Neill. Zalewski, the great Polish director, this is his only English language film, made several absolutely tremendous films that all pushed the envelope. He came from the former Soviet bloc and came to the West and made some remarkable things. But even before leaving Poland, he made like The Devils, Under the Silver Globe, which is stunning, stunning film. But this in particular, if you just look at it for what they're looking for, they're going in looking to be offended, remember, then you will see domestic violence, you will see self-mutilation, you will see rape, you will see, I don't even know how to describe what happens in the subway. You'll see Isabelle Adjani having a freak out and then having some kind of abortion on the floor. But it's never played as even a horror movie. It's an artistic film where Zalewski is using horror to make a larger point about relationships. It's an autobiographical film about the breakdown of his relationship and the ideal woman he wishes he had. He wanted the same woman, but he wishes he had a better version. So he imagines her in this film. And then another character turns up to be like him, who's the Sam Neill character, a more idealized version of him. And that's the monster that's created. So we see this monster being birthed, and then a monster is created throughout the film. And these people couldn't see past any artistic intent, any of it whatsoever, and just saw, well, Sam Neill batters this woman and takes an electric knife to his arm and just starts cutting himself, and couldn't see any merit in what Zalewski's larger point was about toxic relationships and about man, woman, good for each other, bad for each other, the difference between love and hate sometimes not being particularly wide, that kind of thing that he goes into, wonderful in the audio commentary. And they just banned it and put it in the Section 2 list as a depraved film that wasn't quite obscene enough to get on Section 1. But the fact that this is even on the Video Nasties list just shows that these people had no imagination and they had no insight into what makes art. They only saw the opposite of an impressionist painting. When you see a tree, all they saw was a tree. They didn't see the possibilities of what it could be. Everything they did was literal, no more so than what they took from Possession, which I can only recommend to absolutely everybody watching this. You might hate it, but there's a good chance a good number of you think it's one of the best things you see all year if you haven't seen it. And the performances, again, are just stunning. Remarkable.
You have to
film,
wonder if
remarkable
ultimately
achievement.
they didn't understand it, I mean, that's a deep, deep film.
Yeah, I don't think I understood it. So
They're
I
born-
didn't understand when I was 17 and saw it. I was like, this sucks.
I had to watch that like a second time to be like,
I haven't seen it since, though.
yeah, I
It's
bought
remarkable.
like a collection of Japanese laser discs, and I really wanted to see it because the Japanese one, like I'm sure the one Davey has, is the uncut one. And I watched it, and I'm like, I'm not sure I understand what's
That's a
going
good point.
on.
This is a rare example of the American version was actually more cut.
Yes.
So although you didn't have the Video Nasties in America, the version to get released in America was cut to shreds to the point that Zalewski said it's a completely different film. It's not even slightly the film I made. So it's not that they just cut little bits here and there, the most extreme moments.
Yeah, it was a lot. It's like 15, 20 minutes, I think, maybe more.
Something like that, yeah. But
Yeah.
they just cut the heart out of the film.
Well, they had cut 15 minutes out of Werewolf Woman, the one I had in section 3. And the US version was like 15 minutes shorter than even the European version. And
Yeah.
The Dead and Buried was only based on 32 seconds of a cut. That's it, 32 seconds. When they reinstated they were able to reinstate 32 seconds that were part of the criteria of it. What 32 seconds? If it's the first 32 seconds with Lisa Blount, they don't know what they missed. But
a lot of them were obviously just the most gratuitous point, literally in some cases, the point of the axe or the eye, getting stabbed, and then you see the aftermath, that kind of thing. But so that's why a lot of them have just got 7 seconds missing, for example. But for films like this to be outright banned and called filth, and then decades later, it's now considered a massive artistic achievement, and Zalewski is rightly considered one of the greatest Polish directors of his time, along with Kozlowski and the like. Yeah, bizarre.
All right. My choice from section 2 is from 1980, Joseph Ellison's Don't Go in the House.
Nice.
You might remember that. It's the original poster. Yeah, this is a pretty demented film, but it's not it's more about what's implied in this film than actually what you see. It borrows a little bit from Psycho. It borrows a little bit from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Basically, the gist of the story is this guy who, as a kid, was raised by his mom, and his mom basically tortured him with fire. She would, every time he was bad, she would like hold his arms over the stove or whatnot, and she just tortured him. She was a drunk and whatnot. And she was pissed off that the husband left and all this. So he grew up with these scars, both mentally and physically. And as he gets older, and he's an adult now, he has this thing with fire. So, and he's got this deep-seated hatred, love-hate thing with his mother, who still is in his house, but she is like a corpse, without giving too much away. And basically what he does, he goes out, he becomes a serial killer, starts hunting down women, brings them back to the house, chains them up, and tortures them to death. And then he has this whole room set up, kind of like the wacky room in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We have all these relatives, dead, kind of somewhat dead relatives, while all the burn victims are all kind of sitting there in the house, and he talks to them and he hears their voices. So this is his whole descent into madness. But they don't really show a lot of, I think the whole idea of what he's doing to these women is what's so horrific and why this got banned, because there's really not a lot of gore or nasty bits in this movie. There's really not a lot of nudity or anything like that. It's just, I think the whole idea of this storyline of this guy, he puts on the hazmat suit, after he ties them up and chains them up, lights them on fire. I think it's just the whole idea of it, because really, I've seen films that are way more sick than this, but I think it's more the implication of what's going on in this film and why they put it in this category. But you can see much worse. So again, kind of like Davies, it's like this is, to me, at its roots, it's a movie that kind of rips off other movies. It's well done, it's fun to watch, but it ain't all that nasty to me. So
and the guy in it is very young. The guy who would go on to be the twins in The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Patsy Parisi.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's an example of what I said at the start of these small labels, the video labels. They weren't Warner's and weren't Paramount and the like. That was put out by a company called, I think, Arcade Video, and they actually put out an advert with that in the trades and said another nasty from Arcade Video. So and unknowingly they put that out thinking that'll just get us a little bit of notoriety, and then they found themselves on the list and out of business.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Chris, from the category number 1, your
category number 1. Yeah,
this should be. Remember, these are the ones that are now obscene, so they are technically obscene. Yes. Everybody involved can now go to prison just for renting it, for letting someone rent it, for making it, for distributing it, for producing it. Everybody involved.
Right, and owning a copy as well, right, Davey? Right.
buying a copy. I don't know if you just owned it and they couldn't prove that you bought it, but certainly,
Right, but
you know, about possession.
They
but
catch you
certainly
buying it, right? You're out of there. Yeah.
like, as I remember, I used to get Is It Uncut magazine from the UK, and they would always have these horrible stories of, you know, film collectors in the 90s buying copies of Cannibal Holocaust or whatever, you know, coming through the mail. And once customs found out, you know, there was always stories of people getting interrogated and arrested. And I was like, oh, Jesus. I'm like, if I was in the UK, I absolutely would have got arrested with this stuff for sure. So my heart always.
you'd be arrested for a lot of reasons, though, Chris. Let's be honest.
That's true. That is
And
true.
most of them would be quite valid.
But yeah, my heart always went out to the UK film collectors. But yeah, this movie, all right, I guess it's pretty nasty. But listen, I like trash, and there is absolutely a difference between movies that are trash and movies that are garbage. Trash is sexy. This is just garbage. This is The Beast in Heat, which is a 1977 Nazi exploitation movie. Certainly influenced by Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. But there's a really interesting documentary on here where they explain why the movie is so bad, because producers took two unfinished, or maybe they were finished, I don't even know, World War II films, slapped them together, and then also filmed additional footage of Nazi exploitation, you know, film footage with this like short, chubby Italian dude who's completely naked. I'm not sure if he looks more like Mario or Luigi, and he rapes women in a cage. And that's your film. There is lots of Nazi torture, both of men and women. There's a good amount of graphic nudity of both. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw so much hairy man ass other than in The Beast in Heat. Yeah, there's a lot of graphic genital mutilation and things like that. And there were actually a couple times I laughed out loud because it is so fucking horrendously bad. Like there's this part where the Ilsa character has this guy chained up and she's saying whatever to him. And he looks like he's from 1977. He certainly doesn't look like he's in 1945. And he is looking straight at the camera, making the best faces ever as he's being killed. And I watched this movie by myself and burst out laughing because it was so ridiculous. So is it nasty? Yeah, it's fairly nasty, but it is a garbage film. Whatever you do, do not buy The Beast in Heat.
But if you do want to buy a Chris will sell you a copy really cheap.
Yeah. If you need one used, I got one for you.
And goes without saying, Nazi exploitation pretty much always guaranteed you a category 1 because they could get that nice and easily under the Obscene Act because nobody's going to really argue for the Nazis, are they? Nobody's going to.
Right. Nobody's taking that side.
Yeah. In defense of Adolf, you know, it's just not going to happen. So the section 1 is full of Italian films, and then Love Camp 7 and SS.
I was going to say, is Ilsa in? I didn't look for it, but
not in it.
Now, how crazy is that?
Yeah, but again, because it had to be something that was submitted, something that was sold. So if somebody hadn't sold it, there was no crime committed, even though the film exists.
Gotcha.
If you go down the street to the Scala, and the Scala Cinema could show the film, because again, that's a different law, broadcast law and publishing laws. So you could watch Elsa or whatever one we're talking about here, The Beast. But then if you tried to put it out in video, you'd be arrested and put in jail.
Crazy.
So you could watch it down the road. Nobody could be touched for doing it. The cinema could legally show it, no problem whatsoever. But then the minute the video comes out, it's a crime.
Crazy.
Yeah.
There's a great documentary out there about Nazi exploitation films.
Oh, it's on here. Yeah, it's a 90-minute documentary. It's on here.
Pretty much sums the whole thing up.
Don't recommend Nazi exploitation to most people, to be honest. It's something I don't.
Yeah, it's really not the best film genre.
All right, Dan, your final pick.
All right, mine is not trash. It's not garbage. It's artsy, trashy garbage, but you gotta love it. And that is AKA Flesh for Frankenstein, AKA Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, done by Paul Morrissey. Tell you a little background on this story. I have to give you a little story about myself. I saw this in the theaters in 1973 when it came out in Manhattan. Not in the Grindhouse. It came out in a big high-end theater. And if anybody's familiar with Times Square nowadays, okay, it's got like a cobblestoned area. It's all cleaned up, and they have all these cartoon characters you have your picture taken with, and they'll grope you. So it is kind of like old Times Square, but it's more in a fantasy realm now. But you used to be able to drive down Broadway and 7th Avenue and park on the streets. I remember one night we said, hey, this thing, Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, is 3D. And I had never seen 3D at this point because I'd been born after the 3D craze and had not reemerged. This film had a lot to do with the 3D. And we drove down, literally got a spot right in front of the theater between 42nd and 43rd Street, pulled in, went and saw it. And all I can say, seeing this film in 1973, never seeing a 3D film, Dead and Company in the Dome in Las Vegas be damned. Let me tell you, when you're sitting there and watching something jutting out of Udo Kier's chest with apparently his heart on the end of it, and it's hanging over you in the audience, that's like a wow moment. But this is a take on Frankenstein. Andy Warhol had nothing to do with this. He just lent his name, probably for a small amount of money, but he also knew Morrissey, the director, and also stars a Morrissey regular by the name of Joe D'Alessandro, who was
And
part
that's
of
the connection.
and was a male hustler. Whatever, he became enamored. He played in a few films from Paul Morrissey. But the main character in this film is Udo Kier. Okay, and we all know Udo Kier from any number of films, from Blade to Frankenstein, Mark of the Devil.
Blood for Dracula.
What's that? Blood of Dracula is in as well. That was the follow-up film. But this film is a take on the Frankenstein legend, in which we have Dr. Frankenstein, played by Udo Kier. He's living with his sister, was a European actress. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Very short career. Who is sexually frustrated. She's raising 2 twin children, who are the creepiest kids you've seen. They're just bizarro, man, like, and meanwhile, he's building a man and a woman to create a human, super race. And the thing about it is that, okay, the funny thing is he wants to get the perfect man. So Joe D'Alessandro plays a sheep herder, shepherd, or something, works on the property for Dr. Frankenstein. But the great thing about it is Joe D'Alessandro has his Bronx accent. He sounds like he's from New York, but it's apparently in Germany or in Bavaria, somewhere in the mountains. But Joe D'Alessandro's character brings a friend of his who's going to enter the priesthood. Well, Dr. Frankenstein wants a virile man to go. Well, Joe D'Alessandro is the virile man. He wants his head, not the head down there, but the head up here. And he sees the guy who's going to be a priest comes out of the brothel with the 2 women. He thinks, this is my guy. So in a certain sort of way, and young Frankenstein, like the abnormal or abnormal brain, well, they grab the head of a guy who wants to enter the priesthood. They have the operations. He has nothing to do with women, this and that. Meanwhile, his sister's getting involved with Joe D'Alessandro. There's gore, there's guts being spilled, there's lungs extracting. I mean, the whole film, I can understand being kind of over the top offensive to many people, but it's just such a fucking hoot. You cannot deny it. That's the first time I've watched it in years. Like I said, saw it in 3D, had a major impact on me. It holds up in a campy sort of way. And once again, Udo Kier has become kind of a name synonymous with horror and a number of, great character roles over the years. And although the other characters, no one really knows them anymore, Joe D'Alessandro will always be known throughout history, because every time you pick up a copy of Fingers, that set of jeans with the bulging crotch is not Mick Jagger's, as much as everyone wants to believe, but it's Joe D'Alessandro. And now you can understand why he was the most popular hustler in the East Side back in the 60s. But that's all I can say. Flesh for Frankenstein, a.k.a. Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. I have it on a Criterion label. It's been put out in 4K. I think Davey showed it.
Yep.
But once again, that was hard to come by in the States for a long time. It wasn't like it was banned. It just, they probably wanted.
If you get the 7-1, you get 3D glasses.
3D glasses. Let me tell you. But that was
So you get your Flesh for Frankenstein.
That one I saw Caligula also in the Penthouse Theater. So 2 classics.
Nice.
Anyhow, yeah, Flesh for Frankenstein, worth checking out. And if you want, do a 1-2 punch and watch Blood for Dracula, which is also a Morrissey hang-up or follow-up with Udo Kier as Count Dracula.
But it's not as
How,
good.
how wonderful though that these films are, well, this film in particular is on the Video Nasties list, category 1, the most obscene.
This has never been re-released, I believe. I think
put out by the Criterion Collection.
There you go.
The gold standard
Mhm.
for film in the United States when it comes to home video, the Criterion Collection.
But it's so funny. Morrissey's other films, which are about sex and violence, like Flesh, Heat, and Trash, were also involved with Andy Warhol and Jody Alessandro. They've been available on import DVD and VHS DVD for years. You can't find them in the States anymore. They went out of print. So it's always double standard, you know.
Yeah, go figure. All right, Craig.
I'm sorry, one last real bit about censorship. What you'll realize is they're doing this in England. They created lists. They're witch hunts. You have to understand that in the silent era in the United States, every state in the United States had its own censorship bureau. Every film you wanted to show in a state in the United States, you had to go under the discretion of that local censorship bureau. So that's why all these prints over the years were just chopped and beat up, whatever showed up in certain states. So that happened here as well. They didn't put a ban on it. Each state controlled what was cut out, what was cut in.
I mean, you had the Hays Code.
That was beyond. This was before Hays. Then Hays put it under.
Yeah, but then that was 40 years worth of film censorship right there.
Oh yeah, no, you couldn't. You had to leave your foot on the bed. You had to have 2 beds, this, that, the other. Yeah,
couldn't show a toilet.
Comeuppance. I don't know.
All right, Craig, final pick.
My category 1 movie was the infamous I Spit on Your Grave from 1978. Having never seen this before, and this was also one of those movies that was, I heard of it, and I told this to Chris. I distinctly remember kids from high school talking about a particular scene from this movie, and this movie was not found at the places where I rented movies at your grocery stores and drugstores and places like that. So, I mean, I knew the movie existed, but never saw it before. Basic plot: a woman, a writer, goes to a small town to work on her novel and rents a house and is raped and would be murdered, left for dead by 4 men from the town, seemingly out of boredom. They just all of a sudden just decide they want to go rape her and murder her. One of the men would be categorized, I suppose, as mentally challenged, at least from now. But I would consider this is kind of a nasty movie, and mostly, or in my opinion, mostly for the rape scene of the main actress, and it seems to go on for a very long time. It is not titillating or anything at all. It's pretty brutal and nasty and dirty, since it takes place in the woods and on rocks, and I mean, it's just kind of yucky. It's a scuzzy scene. You, the viewer, are happy, at least, that she comes to take her revenge on these 4 men, and you want to see nasty things happen to them for what they did to her. The nastiest of scenes, which is the one that I was told about when I was in high school, was one of the men she takes one of the men who, of course, somehow doesn't recognize her, or he does, and she just kind of like plays up to him that she's a willing participant this time. She gets him into a bubble bath, and in mid hand job, she cuts off his junk, and he bleeds, and locks him in the bathroom, and he bleeds out.
Doesn't he say it feels so good it hurts?
So
Yeah,
good.
something like that. Yeah.
His reaction is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty. I mean,
Quite
of
happy
course,
for 10 seconds.
he's in a bathtub, so you don't see anything. It's obviously implied, but still, it's pretty nasty. And
you see it afterwards.
and,
you do.
yeah,
when it's
and the the final person she gets at the end is with an outboard boat engine, which you also got kind of, you don't see it. But since it's underwater, of course, but nasty. And one thing I had also kind of taken notice of, it's like with movies like this, there's always one guy of a group in these, when they get together to rape or kill a woman. There's always one guy who's the unwilling participant, but he does it anyway. And then she ends up having to dispatch of him as well. I mean, Chris and I just a few weeks ago saw Savage Streets. There's one guy in that didn't want to do it. Last House on the Left, Sudden Impact, the Dirty Harry movie. There's always one guy who has cold feet, but yet he still does it anyway.
Moral dilemma.
Peer pressure, right?
Part of the gang. Yeah. So, but yeah, I would kind of, and for 1978 standards too, I think it is kind of nasty, especially the rape scene that just it goes on. I didn't time it or anything, but it just seems like it goes on for quite a while, where it's like, oh, okay, we get the idea of this, what they're doing to this poor woman. And I watched this streaming on Tubi. To be honest, I don't know. I've never seen uncut or other versions of this. Maybe there's some. Chris, I think, was telling me that there's some versions where it's even longer, or they show more, or something like that. But what I saw was plenty with this. So
if you say you didn't see much in the bathtub, that you must have seen a slightly cut version, because you see quite a lot when he stands up.
I don't remember. I mean, I did watch this several what seems like a month ago, because this was the first of the 3 movies that I watched when we had this idea. I do remember him panicking, and of course she had locked him in the room so he couldn't get out or anything. I don't remember if he stands up or not in the or what you see in the version that I saw.
And you meaning to being cut or uncut, I suppose.
Yeah. But again, you, the viewer, are perfectly okay with seeing what happened to this horrible person. Yeah. But I do sort of understand why this was nasty, especially for the time period. But again, knowing what we know now, again, what I said to Chris before, Walking Dead, and I said this to my wife, it's like, we watched a guy, smash a person, 2 people's heads in with a baseball bat during prime time on cable,
on television,
that anybody could watch, and which was really brutal for what you're watching, but yet that was okay to put on broadcast television for that. So we really are at a different time when it comes to what is permissible for viewership of all ages. But this was pretty nasty, especially for 1978.
And they remade that, didn't they?
Yes, and then the remake had 2 sequels,
Right.
And then they went back and made a sequel to the original.
It's one of the ironies. They remade about 20 of the video nasties into big budget Hollywood productions.
Yeah,
crazy, right?
Toolbox murders and things. It's just baffling.
All right, Jamie.
This one's a weird one, going back all the way to 1963. Blood Feast.
Oh, sure.
There's your poster. I watched this on Fandor. I don't know what the fuck Fandor is, but I got my free trial, watched the movie. That's son of a bitch. It's the first splatter film, not slasher, but splatter. Something tells me the difference between splatter and slasher is kind of difference between speed metal and thrash metal. Yeah, there's a difference, but pretty damn close. Made $4 million, and it only cost $24,500 to make. 24,500. A guy is killing women and making a stew out of their blood and organs to try to bring back his god Ishtar. It's stupid. The whole movie's stupid. So what's so nasty about it? Well, for 1963, it is pretty nasty. You see a woman undressed in her underwear in the beginning, and she gets in the bathtub, and for half a second, you see a nipple in 1963. And she gets attacked, and you see blood coming from her eye. Then you see her leg get hacked off. And you're like, whoa. And then the opening credits happen, and it's like, hey there, 1963 audience, this is what you're in for. And then you see a girl's head get sliced open, her brains are removed. You see a heart being cut from a woman's chest. You see a girl's tongue get ripped out of her mouth in 1963. But here's the thing: the blood is very red, very cartoony. None of it looks too real. Uh, the acting is horrendous. The directing is bad. So nothing really pulls you in. The whole time you see this violence, it's not so much that you see the characters being murdered, you see the actors and actresses pretending to be murdered. And there's a difference that puts a wall between it all, especially with that extra red blood. It's goofy at times. You can tell it was filmed sometimes without a microphone, and it gets almost like Keystone Copy. Keystone Cops-ish, I should say, where people are running around and there's no sound and like weird sound effects and weird music. There's a scene at a pool with no sound and somebody's just splashing water in a sink. You can tell it's just very weird. So it pulls you out of all that violence. But in 1963, I could see it being something, and maybe it had a reputation going into 1980. When did all this start? 1981. People were like, oh, how about that one from 20 years ago? Put that one on there. So I could see that. But yeah, the bullshit scale on this one, because it was around for 20 years and it was pretty disgusting for its day. We're gonna give that one a bullshit meter 4 for me and Mary.
I'd say it's still got a reputation.
Yeah,
as
I was gonna say, I think it's still disgusting by today's. Yeah.
I think I've seen a trailer for that on one of the things, and it looked pretty nasty.
The tongue scene is probably the worst, I would say.
I will get into Herschel Gordon Lewis another time, but yeah, I'm a fan of that.
All right, Davey.
So for category 1, I wanted to pick one. So after picking one that shouldn't be on the list, one that I consider a more artistic film that shouldn't be considered, even though it depicts horrendous things, I wanted to go with one that is more of a typical, what we think of as a video nasty. So I've mentioned him a couple of times, but Joe D'Amato's Anthropophagus.
Oh, yes.
I love this film so fucking much. Anthropophagus is what I think of in my head when I think of a video nasty, where it's actually quite boring for a good part of the runtime. But when you're 13, 14, and that's really the audience that a lot of the video nasty crowds were when they were, at their height, they were targeting. 13, 14, get together, somebody's got a bootleg copy of this kind of thing. And you'd sit and you'd stick it on and you'd see something in the first 5 minutes and you'd think, great, this is going to be brilliant. And you'd wait and you'd wait and you'd wait and nothing happened for another hour. It was just a bunch of people wandering about going, gee, there's nobody around town. What should we do? Why don't we take our clothes off? I mean, it's just nothing happens. There's not even any nudity beyond that. They just kind of imply that they're going to have, but they don't. So I mean, there's nothing for ages in this film. There's just a bunch of young teens in Greece, teens played by your usual Americans in their 40s. Hey there, fellow kids. They are on this deserted Greek island. And there is a killer on the loose. But the way they know that is because they've discovered a few corpses. And this is one of the films that the Tory MP that I mentioned thought was an actual snuff film, and they use real corpses. And they are the most fake-looking things you've ever seen in your life. How the hell he could look at something like this and think they've used real bodies for this? This is desecration. This is heresy. This is disgraceful. And nothing horrendous happens in the film until something really horrendous does happen in the film, and that's kind of one of the great things about the video nasty. It's almost the dance, the anticipation. Is you wait for that one moment of that's why it's a video nasty, and in this case, you go back to the killer's lair, and there's a pregnant woman who's in jeopardy, and you think she's been bumped off at the start, but then she comes back, you think, oh great, she's going to survive. She gets bumped off for now the second time, because this time she really is dead. She gets her throat eaten out. And this guy here, played by the wonderful George Eastman, this guy here reaches inside her, pulls the baby out, and takes a good munch. And at that point, after being bored for an hour, everybody goes, yay! And that is the point in a video nasty. That one moment of, Jesus Christ, did you see that? Well, rewind it right now. We need to see that again. He ate that baby. That was a baby. Did you see that? It wasn't a baby. It was a bit of chicken. It was chicken that they just put in some tomato bloody ketchup and called it a fetus. Right? So it's not a fucking baby, for goodness sake. They didn't convince a mother to let a baby be pulled out of her. Right? So nonsense all the way. But it just goes to show you that these people were so disingenuous that they wanted. I mean, I don't think he could possibly thought this was real. And that really comes to the crux of the whole thing about video nasties. That, again, for me, censorship should only happen if, like a bit like Jamie said, the act being depicted itself is illegal. So, animal cruelty, for example. Apart from that, adults should be allowed to decide and make informed choices. So this is now 18 rated. Anybody above 18 can see it. That's fine. I'm perfectly happy with that. Above 18, I don't think there should be cuts for any film, apart from that kind of thing like animal cruelty. But there still are. We still have that kind of censorship. And why is this now acceptable? But it wasn't for all those years. Why are all these films now released uncut? Because they didn't really believe what they were saying all along in most of the cases. It was just the moral bullshit of the day, and then they moved on to the next thing. Immigrants coming in boats, COVID denying, whatever their cause may be, they've done this. This has been done. We're bored with that now. So let's move on to the next thing. So the same papers that are using the kind of language that they use now about immigrants in this country, it's the exact same language they used in the Video Nasty article. It's fascinating. It is fascinating to read the same rhetoric that is used 40 years later for a completely different social phenomenon being used 40 years ago for video nasties. And it's prudish, tribal nature that comes from small island mentality. And yeah, just they are the depraved ones, if you ask me. The censors and the people who advocate the banning of art because they don't like it and they don't want you to see it because they know best. That, to me, is the true video nasty.
Yep. No, well said. Yep. All right. So my final pick is from 1971. I'm guessing the reason why this film is on the top slot here is because this director, this Italian director, they probably wanted to nail for something else early on, but they took his first movie that really stepped up the violence in a big way to say, all right, this is the film we're going to target. A Bay of Blood, otherwise known as Twitch of the Death Nerve by Mario Bava. Is this his most violent film? I would agree, yes. Is this film highly influential to a lot of slasher films that came later on, specifically in the 80s? Like we noticed, like Friday the 13th, I think the first film is on this list as well. I don't know if you have a Friday the 13th without this film. Basically, it's a very simple story about a rich family, husband and wife have a mansion on a body of water, looking over a body of water. That's the bay. And one by one, the two of them get bumped off. Who's going to inherit the mansion and the bay, right? You got all these kids, people who worked for the family, right? Everybody's going to be trying to see who can get the inheritance to, land this property. Then you throw in all these teenagers who have nothing to do with the story whatsoever, who find their way onto the property. They want to have a party, they want to go swimming, whatever, and they get bumped off one by one in the most horrific ways. There's great practical effects here, great death scenes. But is this any different than all these films we saw in the 80s that had a similar type plot? Not really. But maybe because this was Mario Bava going a little bit over the edge, they were like, yeah, we're going to get this guy. We couldn't get him with any of those kind of more stylish giallos that he did beforehand, but we're going to get him here because, there's people getting impaled and there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on here. So I don't know. I think this is one of his masterpieces. It's easily in my top 3 favorite Bava films. I think it's so influential on so many films that came after. I mean, you could talk about some of the earliest slasher films. And there's whether it's Black Christmas or Psycho or what have you, but man, this has got to be in the conversation. And I don't think you get the Friday the 13th and the Halloweens and all those other films, those franchises, without this film. In fact, there's even some scenes in this movie that some of the other films that I mentioned kind of mimic and use later on, but that's a story for another day. So yeah, Bay of Blood to the Death Nerve.
You, Dan, and I did a bit of a show, our top, and it's amazing to me. The Bava, even though neither of these were in my top 5, he essentially invented the wheel twice: Blood and Black Lace and Bay of Blood. Without those 2 films, you completely don't have Giallo. You don't have the Black Glove Killer. The White Glove Killer with the face and the hat, and you don't have the slasher cycle as we know it.
Yep.
Twice he invented the wheel.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep, absolutely.
Excuse me, Nasties were based on a personal agenda. That's all it was.
Yep.
Nothing to do with
prudishness, and they were looking for something at the time just to take attention away from the unemployment rate's gone up. We better try and put something in the headlines. Same as it ever was.
The famous
so
thing.
yeah, politicians haven't changed much.
Yeah, same as. The Falklands War went a bit askew. Thatcher was getting some bad headlines for the sinking of the Belgrano and things. All of a sudden, hey, the video nasties are a good thing to latch on to try and get some moral outrage. And it's not even a right-wing thing because the left put up no resistance whatsoever. Everybody just went along with it. And
all you do is launch these films into into outer space. People are like, if they're told they can't see it, now they want to see it.
Of course, because you could tell someone you shouldn't see something, they're going to want to go watch it, right?
So the Video Nasty list is a to see list.
Yes,
of course.
Check them off that you see them now.
Yep. You get pre-printed lists that you can tick them off. There are now box sets. Chris and I both have it of all the trailer compilations and documentaries. It is now something that we look back on and think, bloody hell. And it wasn't that long ago. That's the frightening thing. This isn't something that Dan was saying, from the silent era. This is in all of your lifetime, just a bit before mine. But you guys were all going to movies at this point.
Yeah.
So it's not that long ago that people were being sent to jail for renting The Evil Dead.
Crazy. It really is.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be a public outcry about anything. I mean,
and if it wasn't Video Nasties, it would have been the price of fish.
You can always...
It's just not. It's total not. And I know we've gone long on this one, but it's such an in-depth and bizarre topic that I think it really needed.
I'm just curious though. I didn't pay attention to it. I know that in the video stores, when the video stores first started opening in the United States, I was old enough to walk into that room that had the saloon doors to see what was behind there. But I'm wondering, all you other guys that are a little bit younger than I, when you were going to the video store, did they have a section like adult, not adult only, but they won't rent them? It was own personal agenda.
Yeah, it had a sign. You had to be 18 or 21 and over to even walk through the doors. Right?
Oh, for porn, yes, for porn, yeah. But to me, as a kid, not to make this a whole thing, I always thought that was the weird thing with just movies, the opposite of what was going on in the UK. So I have to be 17 to go see Friday the 13th without an adult. but as I'm an 11-year-old kid and I could totally rent it on VHS and watch it home.
So there you go.
I never understood that. It's fine at home,
'Cause I
but you
never
won't
paid
let me do it
attention
in
to that.
public. Yeah.
And exactly the opposite of the UK, because
Yeah.
you could go see that in the cinema, but then you couldn't ever even get it on video, and if you tried, you'd be arrested.
Yeah.
But it was okay to go see the cinema.
Crazy. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Where I'm going to drop in the comments below, I'll have it pinned at the top. I'm going to drop the link to the Wikipedia page that has all of the, what is there, 70 some odd films listed.
72 official ones, yeah.
72. So you'll see section 1, 2, and 3. It's in order. And I urge everybody to go to this page and look at all the films that are, I mean, we only picked 3 each, right? So we covered a very small section of them, but you'll see a lot of your favorite films that probably many of you watching the show have seen. And you're thinking, there's nothing really all that nasty about it. That's the
Violent Night, Deadly Night 2 is on there. Fucking
Right.
Garbage Day is on there.
As Jamie said, this is your film to-do list.
Yes, yes,
Watch
for
it.
sure.
You have to watch this.
For sure.
Like, any Monsters Den fan has got a head start. They've probably seen half the list already.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So go check that out. And we thank everybody for sticking with us, because I think this was a fascinating topic. And quite frankly, who else is doing videos on the Video Nasty list on YouTube? Nobody but the Monster Den is.
Because we'll all be arrested now.
We all will be.
They're
So
coming.
thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the
All
damn
the
time.
time.
For Craig Kaminsky, Dan Brown, Chris Allo, Jamie Laszlo, I was going to say Jamie Gallagher, and Dan. It's late. It's been a long day for me. Jamie Laszlo and Davey Gallagher. I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time here on the Monsters Desk. It's box sets and special editions next time. So see you in 2 weeks for that. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.